Well, thank you very much. As a former MEP, I'm always glad to come to Brussels and see my former colleagues. Let me just begin by saying that I think that the regulation and the directive we're discussing here fundamentally are necessary, are good ideas, but I think my main point is that it needs a lot more work. A lot more work, and that's, if that's all you take away from this, that's very good. But based on our experience, I think that there's some philosophical problems that we face, then there's some attitudinal and cultural problems, and then there are issues with awareness of the sophistication of cyber today. I mean, I think the first problem that we face whenever we talk about data protection is trying to get out of the George Orwell, Thomas Pynchon, paranoid bad state model and realize that the role of the state is changing very much today from being the entity we have to protect the citizen from to the state becomes one of is the only real fundamental guarantor of the citizen's digital life, digital privacy and security, and that is a big change. The Orwell paradigm of Big Brother, it was a time when the only entity that had the resources to spy on its citizens was the state. Well, that's changed considerably. And in fact, the ability of sort of individuals even to spy on people has just skyrocketed thanks to the possibilities of digital technology. So we need to be much less concerned today about the state being the bad guy. I mean, it's not that it's gone away, but that's not the big problem, I would argue. So the question I would then say is it's the Big Brother paradigm versus the big data paradigm. Because big data, and it doesn't have to just be big companies, but big data is the new currency that we have today. We have all these people creating apps, free apps you download into your iPad or iPhone or Nokia, whatever you have, and they're free. Well, the other aphorism I would say is today, there's no such thing as a free app. They're out there to make money, which is understandable. And we download apps and then we upload information constantly having to do with how many push-ups we do or how we sleep. This is all data. It's all monetized because otherwise, why would someone spend their time developing an app? Now, how do we come to terms with this? I would suggest, I think it's a serious problem, but on the other hand, I'm not sure the way to do it is to put administrative burdens on app developers when in fact that will not affect any app developer who is outside the European Union. So in fact, what we may be doing with this directive and the regulation, in fact, is putting our app developers at a distinct disadvantage to someone who's doing it outside the EU. And how do you regulate those apps? Or what are the administrative burdens that you put on privacy on those people who are outside of the European Union? Then it can lead to, the first effect would be that app developers in the EU will be at a disadvantage compared to app developers in non-EU countries. Secondly, we don't decide that, we don't look, when you download an app, you don't look at where it's from. So what's the solution? We decide, okay, no apps from outside the EU, that's not realistic. Just as much of a privacy issue not addressed by this are cookies. And so if you go into a web page, you have everything you look at is, in fact, if you have a cookie there, everything is somewhere on file, and so you end up getting directed ads or because you've been looking at an article somewhere. And what do you do when you're looking at, say, the New York Times? it's not in the EU, and they have a cookie on what articles you look at. So these are the kinds of issues. I don't have an answer for it, but certainly these are far more sophisticated issues than are adequately, in my mind, dealt with the current state of affairs, which is why I would say that we need to well, just bring in more people who have expertise in this area so that we can, in fact, move ahead and come up with something reasonable. Because as it is, the effect will be to kill certain industries in the EU, but will not in any way benefit the citizen because you just move offshore and then none of the legislation applies. I don't know how to deal with that, but that's a fundamental issue. Big data, I predict, will become the sort of, as I said earlier, the new currency of the future because it is really something that's easily monetizable. Now, we can deal with it at a sort of, when we look at big data, when it comes to big companies, we can address the issue of privacy, you know, Google's and Amazon's and Dropbox, cloud computing operations, though there are some significant issues there as well, because in fact, if it's a US company, the FBI is jurisdiction, and if you're not a US citizen, they can come and look at whatever you have if it's stored on a US company server. Again, these are issues that we need to look at, especially since right now I do have the steering group on cloud computing in Europe. We will end up with some very severe issues. I think that we need to, again, look at when we start developing this directive. There are other issues with this directive that has to do with, that I think have to do with the choice of the instrument. A directive requires considerable more debate. I'm not sure that a regulation that will just be put into effect is what is doing the job right now. And then again, there's some, I think some deeper and fundamental issues that we have to face that are not adequately dealt with in this, in the current state of affairs with this, but more broadly. And that is transparency versus data protection. I think that's a very big issue in Europe. For example, in Northern Europe, we really are big on transparency. I mean, in my country, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, there's a fundamental proposition that no public money can be spent anonymously. If it is from taxes, it must be, we must know where the money goes. That's just the way we do things. And here, to go out of the cyber realm, a good example is cap funds. Who gets how much? It is inconceivable for us that there would be any lack of transparency in who gets public money in cap funds. Well, for 50 years, no one knew who got cap funds and how much. Oh, that's the Common Agricultural Policy. That's 40% of the EU budget. So we don't know, or we didn't know where 40% of the EU budget went, because it goes to individual people. And this was all under the guise of data protection. Well, then the Commission finally got around to realizing this may not be a good idea, and they passed a new directive or regulation that said, okay, we have to know where the money goes. And then a whole bunch of countries took the Commission to court, and they won the court case, and now once again, we don't know where 40% of the budget of the EU, which after all is almost 8 trillion euros over a 7-year period. We don't know where it goes. And this is a philosophical issue. What's more important, data protection or transparency? We tend to believe in transparency in my country, and in a number of other countries. Other countries, under the guise, I would say, of data protection, don't want people to know who's getting your taxpayers' money. So, I mean, these are the kinds of things we have to look at fundamentally when we come to directives and regulations such as this. Is that data protection is not necessarily a holy grail if it provides a fig leaf for lack of transparency in public expenditures. And I think that's something, again, we have to look at. Other things that I would really hope that we do is that the rate of technological development far exceeds the rate of legislative development. if we look today at how far we have come only in the past 7 or 8 years, it clearly, from things such as basic as Facebook to new architectures of personal security, that whatever was adequate 10 years ago is inadequate today. Whatever is in the current legislation under discussion is barely adequate for how far we are developing. So I think that I would certainly think we need to get much more technical expertise on this, get out of the old model of pure Datenschutz and think about both transparency as well as what is possible with the current state of technology. One of the fundamental problems we face in all realms, be it in crime, be it in warfare, or in the case of data protection, is that borders have become meaningless. And so, be it cyber attacks do come almost inevitably across borders, and there's no legislation to deal with that other than the Budapest Convention, which is not ratified by many countries. Cyber crime, by definition, is going to be cross-border because you can't prosecute. They really can't prosecute you too easily if you're across the border, and that's why there are all kinds of criminals, especially like countries that have not signed the Budapest Convention, so that they can do all kinds of nasty things with your credit cards. And then we come. Okay. Well, anyway, so these are the kinds of there's a whole range of issues which I think are inadequately dealt with this current legislation, and my request would be to bring in a whole bunch of more people with expertise. And also and finally, people with governments that have lots of experience with data protection and with IT services, government services, because here again, I won't get into the technical details, but I think some of the architectural solutions to data security that we have developed, for example, in my country, are sort of borderline on whether they fit into this directive, but clearly we do a better job. And so we would like to see these things taken into account. And I think, finally, what we do need in Europe, and this does not really talk about the directive itself, but more broadly, is we need to come to the understanding that that it is a new responsibility of governments to provide their citizens with security in cyberspace. The refusal of many EU governments to actually, for example, implement a digital signature, or the inability to implement a digital signature law, which impedes the development of the legal environment in Europe, and also provides the basis for a secure environment for our citizens, I think is a bigger problem than some of the issues addressed here. The enemy should not be it shouldn't be that we look at small app developers as an enemy and drive them out of the EU. The issue should be rather how we guarantee our citizens' security and what is the role of governments in providing data security to our citizens. And I think with that I've used up my time, and I'll be glad to answer questions later. Thank you very much.